Well, today's episode of the Entrepreneurial Clinician podcast fills me with incredible joy because we are going to be speaking to somebody I have a lot of admiration for, whose LinkedIn profile happens to read like an amazing transferable skills analysis. So, for all of the rehabilitation counselors who are listening to this podcast, if you go and find today's guest on LinkedIn and look at how he has built his career, it is quite phenomenal. And my guest today is Ed Johnson. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you in a minute, but thank you so much for giving up your time with your new family to come and speak to us today, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, I'm on Darug land this morning.
Thank
The
you.
traditional custodians here are the Darug people who've been here for thousands of years. So I understand you're on Darug land as well this morning.
Darug land. There we
Just up
go.
the road, in
Mm,
fact. Yeah. So I think it's a really today's topic, I suppose, is really relevant to Indigenous culture. It's
mm.
staying connected with family, it's staying connected with community and culture. So I'd really like to acknowledge the Darug people and their continued custodianship of the land where we're sitting today.
Absolutely. And I so appreciate you taking that leadership role there for us who can get very busy and very task focused and forget about where we've come from, where we're standing, and just helps us orient ourselves in time and place, which I think is something that the traditional custodians of our land can teach us. Wonderful.
Certainly.
Thank you. So, Ed, I've given you a little bit of a wrap about your career, but can you share with us what you studied at university, what your career's been like, and what you do for work today?
Yeah, so I've taken sort of a little bit of a roundabout route to where I am
Mhm.
today. I started off studying anthropology and linguistics, and absolutely have always loved learning about culture and learning about languages since I was a little boy, sort of growing up around a dad who is a bit of a polyglot and speaks lots of languages. So I was always looking at books about languages, but also looking at books about biology and anatomy and all those sorts of things. And at the end of my degree, I really wanted to go into the helping professions. I wanted to apply the knowledge that I had in anthropology and linguistics to try to help people make their lives better. So I studied speech pathology, and after that, I spent a number of years working in rural and remote Australia
Mm,
across a range of different rural and remote communities where people really don't have a lot of health services, a lot of community services, a lot of social services. And that brought me a lot of joy. A few years into that journey, I saw that there were these really stark inequities between
mm,
what people in metropolitan areas were getting in terms of these services and the services available to people in the bush. So I went to study a PhD, and I looked at the experiences of families of children with intellectual disabilities and what made a good life for them, and how we could help to improve that further, to see what they wanted and how they wanted that to be. So that sort of looked at different service delivery models for allied health, but also in the context of the policy of a really a big shift in
mm.
social policy in Australia, which was the National Disability Insurance Scheme,
Yeah.
which sort of, in a sense, sort of privatized the disability and social services sector in Australia, moving from sort of government administered services for people with disabilities to a market-based system where each person or family would have a certain amount of money allocated to them, and then they would spend that as they wanted. But the issue with that is that in a remote community, you don't necessarily have a service there to be able to
Yeah.
spend it on. So the market-based system, and this is probably a topic for another chat, and I think you've probably chatted about it a little bit before on the podcast, but it means that there's really this big sort of vacuum and a
Yes.
lot of difficulty with a market-based system that works for metro areas and doesn't work in the bush necessarily as well. So off the back of that PhD, I was approached by my co-founders who were
Mhm.
really interested in similar sorts of uh, work and community development, and said, "Would you like to start a social enterprise, a telepractice social enterprise, where we can sort of fill the gaps for people in these remote areas where they don't have in-person services, to sort of capacity build in
Mhm.
those communities, based on some of the models that I created in my PhD." And yeah, 6.5 years later,
Wow.
we're now sort of servicing people all over Australia, and who knows, maybe overseas in future as well, where they can't get occupational therapy and speech pathology services otherwise, or where that creates convenience for them, or allows them to sort of get services more quickly than they would otherwise. Um, so I learned a lot about social enterprise um, in that 6 years, and I sort of dabbled in academia throughout my speech pathology career, teaching in speech pathology. And late last year, I took the jump out of sort of allied health, and went into lecturing about social enterprise, and now work at the University of Sydney as my day job, lecturing in social enterprise. And I run a program called the Remote and Rural Enterprise
Mm.
Program, where we partner with organisations and communities in rural and remote areas and Indigenous enterprises. And we help them to work on social issues that they have, or elements of a social enterprise that they have, to help create more sustainable um, and prosperous futures for those communities and individuals and enterprises. And it's really fulfilling, and I feel like it's not too far away really from where I started, in terms of
Mm.
trying to work directly with community to figure out what they want, what's
Mhm.
important to them, and
Mm.
try to help them to get towards that goal.
Wow. So it's quite. I'm just listening to it going. So we've got this, this young kid who grew up in regional New South Wales, like where there's lots of bush around, lots of paddocks, maybe some wind turbines, who knows? And you became fascinated with language and people and communities. And then you went, how do I help people? So you studied speech pathology and you started helping people. And then you went, how do we make this more equitable? How come there are people in the bush who don't get the same services as people in the cities? That's kind of not okay. So you built some co-founders, and then you built a whole social enterprise out of that, which I know at times was heartbreaking. I went on that journey a little bit with you guys. And then you went, we actually need to start to let people know that there's a model out here that can work. And let's go back to the people of the land and ask them what they want, rather than the adage of health professionals, which is do what I say because I'm the expert. So that's to me, that's a marvelous. So I always wanted to be a speech pathologist, but I didn't quite get that ATAR marks back in the day. And the thought of going and doing a degree before a degree just made me feel really ill. So I'm a rehab counselor instead. So I have this incredible obsession for speech pathologists and everything that you can offer the world. But you've had a lot go on there, and you were doing more than one thing at a time, right? You didn't kind of stop your speech pathology clinical job and then go to an academic job and then go to a founding job. You were kind of blending these things together. Would that be an accurate way to describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really sort of at times became obsessive, and I really it still is, but it was more so than a core part of my identity that I needed to
Mm,
help. I needed to help as many people as I could, and I needed to do that as efficiently and as effectively as I could. So I was um, not jumping from one thing to the next, but sort of transitioning slowly, and not necessarily intentionally, but I would pick up a new project. I was working full time, and then I picked up the PhD on the side, and then
mm,
I pick up volunteer jobs. I was volunteering at the hospital. I was taking leave from my job to go and volunteer at the hospital. And then I was, volunteering on boards, and it was really, it really sucked up a lot of my life,
mm.
and it meant that I didn't have time for the other good things in life as much, like family, friends, socializing, it's community sport, all those things that really bring people joy. And
Mm.
I think that was something that I didn't understand at the time, that I understand a lot better now, I think, about myself.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that so openly and vulnerably, because I know my journey uh, since 2020 has been all about, if I can't do this thing called allied health anymore, who am I? What what purpose do I serve? And it's kind of been a little bit of an existential crisis, but then it's gone right down into this whole sense of self and realizing some insecurities that sit there. So I appreciate you bringing that up so quickly in our interview today. So I would like to ask, in amongst all of that you were doing, do you think you ever experienced something that you might now reflect on as burnout, or a period of time when work was unhealthy? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Several times, and I would
Mm,
go through this cycle of sort of burning out, and then recovering a bit, and then working up and up and up in terms of the capacity that I felt I had, but I didn't really, and then sort of breaking down again, and not knowing how to manage it all. And it really, probably the best example was fairly early on in my career.
mm,
I was working as uh, a sole practitioner, really, but I was working within a large um, institution for people who, a residential facility for people who had intellectual disability and mental illnesses, sort of chronic, long-standing
mm,
mental illnesses, and really, really challenging environment to be in, because it was, in the middle of the countryside. There was really cold nights where I'd be sort of working late and tramping down the road to the next building, to the ward, and you'd walk into the ward and it'd smell, and you'd walk past the kitchen and the food would just have that horrible sort of odor
mm.
that those kitchens do
Yes.
sometimes in sort of an aged care facility, or somewhere like that. There was shouting and yelling from nurses. There was shouting and yelling from the residents living there. And my job was, as the only allied health person there, was to try to work with these residents to try to get them back into living in the community, so supported living in the community,
Mm,
because this institution was devolving, and sort of going out of service, really. And a lot of the nursing staff there have worked there for decades. And when, young 24, 25-year-old Ed walked
yes.
in and, asked them about their client, and, said the bosses had said, we need to try to figure out how so and so can get back in the community and what that means in terms of communication and meal times. They were often very resentful. I would have, people just refusing to talk to me, just looking me in the face and walking away. I'd have
Oh,
people yelling and screaming at me. Um, I didn't mind that when that was the residents because that was their way of communicating.
yeah.
But the nursing staff had different abilities that they should have been using to
Mm,
communicate in a more socially acceptable way. But that was a lot on my shoulders, and I just
mm,
kept working more and more and more to try to build connections, to try to help the residents. And because of the sort of the shift work that was involved with the nurses, a lot of them didn't know who I was. So I'd turn up on the ward and they'd tell me
right.
to get out, or they didn't know who I was, or they'd say,
Mm,
get away from so and so when I, had spent months with them trying to work on a particular way of communicating. And then it just, completely destroy all that work because they'd get overwhelmed and meltdown and start
mm,
throwing and kicking and hitting and things again. So it was tough, and I felt very alone. And I thought the best way to get it better was to sort of try to do as much work as I could, so I could get these people out into the community living in more supported settings. And I I saw a lot of mental illness in there. I saw a lot
mm,
of um, people who had very long-standing, schizophrenia, PTSD, depression,
mm.
a lot of complex trauma in there. And I was surprised, I suppose, or maybe I wasn't so surprised when I started seeing some of these things in myself. Um,
Ah,
and when I was at home, I would, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I could just sit in the one spot. I needed everything to be clean. I needed everything to be tidy and in the same spot. Otherwise, I I didn't know what to do with myself.
mm,
And even at the severe end, I started seeing things. I started seeing things that really weren't there. And probably the scariest thing was that I wasn't scared of that because I just wanted to get through it. I just wanted to
wow.
say, well, I'm seeing spiders on the walls, or I'm seeing a man following me around the
Yeah,
house who I know
yeah.
is not there. But my pragmatic mind was saying, well, I can see that, but I don't want to deal
Hang on
with
a minute. Can you just hang on? We'll come back to this. Now, I'm recording a podcast.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, guys.
How
Until 11. All right. So sorry, Ed.
That's all
Jen,
right.
not okay. Okay, so we've got go back to I was seeing things, my pragmatic mind. Yep.
Yeah, so I was seeing things, and my pragmatic mind was thinking, well, I know I can see these things and I know they're not real, but really that doesn't help me get my work done.
Ah,
So it's not useful to engage with it. And um, I even at one point started hearing voices, and really that's probably the time when I sort of I called my parents because
mm,
I was living alone at the time, and I said I don't think I'm coping. I don't know what's going on, uh,
hmm
but I think I need help with this. And I saw a psychiatrist. I saw a psychologist for quite a while too. And I had a diagnosis. I'd had anxiety and depression for a long time before that, but was well managed. But they gave me these diagnoses of psychosis and OCD and PTSD. And I yeah, I think at the time it was just sort of again, it was, well, okay, I've just got this, so I have to deal with it now,
mm,
but I'll just put it on the side until I can get my work done and
mm.
be a success.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's quite a, and I'm not saying this to be judgmental, of course, but they're quite extreme symptoms. Like when most of us think of burning out, we think of being fatigued or overtired, or in my case, hoping I get hit by a bus, or because that's turned up for me as well. It's rare that we hear somebody talk about the fact that, your mental health really started to deteriorate in such a significant way. How so it's very easy in this day and age for us to go, self-care and burnout is the responsibility of the person, right? We see a lot of language around, if you do these 5 things before 5 a.m., you won't burn out. If you join the 4 a.m. club, you'll be fine. Drink 5 liters of water. It's all about the person, the person, the person. But I'm curious, because you were in an environment that was considerably unhealthy. How do you now make sense of being a health professional in such an unhealthy environment? Do you have any insights there?
Yeah, it was tough, and I think I'm very, very introverted. I don't
Mm,
take the opportunity to sort of go out and have a chat with people. I don't like, I'm very happy to sit in silence on a 4 hour car trip with someone next to me, and I will not feel that sort of pull of the weight of the silence at all.
mm,
Um, so I think people at work didn't realize what effect it was having on me. So, even, we had a small team of sort of the management and the policy and project type people.
mhm,
Um, and and when they saw me, they probably didn't see that, and I can reflect
mm,
on that now. They wouldn't have seen necessary. I mean, they would have seen that I was seeming tired and not willing to have a joke that much, and but it was very much I had my work mask on, and
mm.
sort of felt that they're getting through it, so I should be able to as well.
Yes, yes.
Um, but I think once I did bring it up with my boss, and she was a very I think sort of she had worked there as a nurse before. She'd
Mhm,
gone on and done other things and come back to this place, but so she understood the culture that was in there. But she
mhm.
was a very supportive person. She was very supportive to me, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But I don't think she saw that at the time. And when I did tell her this, she sort of she said, you've got to take time off. You've got to not work past this particular hour. It's not, there's always going to be work here. And so I think it's sort of um, it comes back to this for a lot of things. You've just got to talk about it. You just have to force yourself to talk about this stuff. And
Mm,
that's where you find the strategies then, because you talk to someone who has been through it. You might not see it on their face, or you might not know it before about this person, but everyone's gone through tough times, or if they haven't, then they've done something amazing to not have to go through hard
mm,
times. And they have a way of doing that. And so I think just those initial conversations that I had to force myself really hard to have with people, to say I'm feeling really terrible and I'm not sort of fine as I look on the
mm.
outside. What can I do? Um, I would say that's the number one piece of advice that I would give people
Yes,
in that situation. And each person is going to need different strategies
absolutely.
to be able to get better or to stay well.
Mm.
There's no, I don't, yeah, I don't really subscribe too much to that. There's 5 things you can do to stay well.
Oh no, I
Uh,
was laughing as I said that. I don't
um,
either.
there's 5 things maybe that each person can do, but they're going to be 5 different things for every
Mm.
single person in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate those insights. I'm trying to imagine what it would have been like to be in your mid-20s, incredibly introverted, like you've described, a male in a very female-dominated environment, having to go to your boss and say, despite how good my work is, and despite the fact that I'm here all the time, I feel really awful. Like that shows an incredible amount of courage. Can you remember what your heart was doing or your body was doing the day? Or were you just so flat that you were like, I've just got to do this. I've just got to function?
Oh no, I was shaking. I
Mm.
yeah, I was probably it was, I had a lot of those sort of physical symptoms
Mm.
of anxiety then. It felt like my heart was racing, my breath was shallow. I felt sweaty and
Mm.
jittery, and I at that point in time, your brain doesn't know how to use words. You're functioning on
Yes.
your limbic brain. You're
Yes.
not using your forebrain. You don't know what to say. So
Mm.
sometimes it's best to write it down. I don't think I did
Mm.
write it down then. I think I just sort of
Mm.
tried to sort of um, stumble my way through it. But she understood the basic message of what I was trying
Mm.
to get across in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to bring up. It's we as employers or colleagues who care about each other, when we start to notice behavior change in our colleagues. So when I start to get overwhelmed and burnt out, I don't cry. I get angry and I micromanage. So, and that's really uncomfortable for people around me, right? Because they're ugly behaviors. And I've been in enough organizations now to help people understand that guy over there that you all think is a horrible, horrible person is hurting badly. He turns up 10 minutes early to everything and then berates you for half an hour because he's trying to assert some control because he's feeling so out of control, which is much harder behavior to deal with than the I'm crying in the cupboard, or I'm going to the bathroom 25 times in an hour, or I'm just not turning up to work. So I think, recognizing that when people come to us to talk about some of this stuff, we've got to let go of our functioning brain and go, wow, this person has done an incredibly courageous thing today. The best thing I can do is be present with them. Yeah.
Mm.
So you've done something that I've never been able to do, and that is work in academia. But I'm curious, I'm curious to know, in your career, have you seen changes in our workplace systems or our social systems or our expectations in the workplace that might be helpful to allow people to talk about I'm not coping at work, or harmful for people to be able to talk about I'm not coping at work? I'm just curious because you've been involved in some fairly big organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at an organizational level, I don't think I've ever been involved with a business that has, you said anything bad about mental health, or even to the opposite end. They've all promoted um, uh, social and emotional well-being at work, in the workplace, from that organizational level. But I think the issue is with how that filters down and how the
Mm.
culture is created at the top of the organization, and that manifests differently in different organizations. I think at Umbo, my company, we do try very hard to get feedback on a regular basis from people about workloads, about well-being, and make sure that people are seeing the leadership team working manageable workloads. We don't always get that right, but and it's difficult in a startup sort of context. But there's there's a lot to be said for actually being open and honest about when you're getting that right and when you're not getting it right, and
Mm.
and giving everyone in the organization the same level of input into talking about what they need for social and emotional
Mm.
well-being. So we have, we've got an employee assistance program that's I think reasonably well used at Umbo. We have different communities of practice and different sort of interest groups within the organization, which focus on particular events or particular groups. So neurodiversity, indigenous communities, We talk about LGBTQI plus communities as well, and trying to just support and make it a safe space for everyone.
Mm.
And that's not directly talking about burnout, but what it does do is it allows those people to communicate in the way that they need to, so that they can talk about things like burnout. Um, and that's why I think that that's important from that burnout perspective. So
Yes.
in larger institutions like universities, there I think it's very variable in terms of the team, and in terms of the sometimes the level of protection that your
Mm.
direct manager can give you,
Mm. Mm.
because it is a matter sometimes of the directions coming from on high to say, well, we need more work out of your team, and then the manager says, well, you guys got to do more work, etc., etc. Um,
Yes.
but a really good manager is someone who um, is basically removing roadblocks along the way for you and letting you do your own work your own way. And the really good managers that I've had in my time are people who have done that. They're not telling you how to do things. They've hired you because you have a certain uh, particular expertise in an area, and so
Mm.
what they need to do is to get things out of your way, and sometimes that might be um, uh, unreasonable workload expectations. So I've had um, managers help me with that before, just basically saying, well, to senior management, this is an unreasonable amount of work,
Mm.
and going into bat and saying, well, these are the things that we need in terms of resourcing for the department, and coming and reporting to me that you are to stop work at this time, you are only to work on these projects because I want your best work, because that's why we have you here, for your best work, not to do a really average job on too many projects.
Oh, wow. I can't wait for the transcription of that. You've just given so much great insight there. Number one, if you're a manager or a leader inside of a business, creating a safe space for people to be able to come and talk to you. That doesn't mean you need to be everybody's counselor, by the way, but creating a way that people can come and talk to you, because it's probably going to look different to other everywhere else. Nobody wants to be called into the principal's office. So it's finding another way to be, especially the really introverted people who are highly dedicated to their work and terrified that they're going to be told they're doing a bad job, right?
Mhm.
So how else can we create opportunities for people to have genuine conversations and feel safe enough to go, this workload is hard for me? And our initial response as the leader is not to go, why is it so hard for you when everyone else can cope with it? I just need the bills paid. But asking the question, what makes this hard for you? But then also being able to understand you're not going to get it right all the time. I love the way you said that, Ed. It's like we often have conversations here at UMBO. We're trying to get this stuff done and we don't always get it right. So I think as leaders and managers, we need to give ourselves some grace. Oh, I could have used that. To go, oops, I got it wrong. What could I have done better? What could I have done better? Um, so wrapping this up, I'd like to ask you now, with all of this history and you've been doing this work a long time and you've got some things under your belt, what makes work good for you, Ed?
I think it's the one thing is the people. So having really supportive people around you, like that the manager who moves the roadblocks, but also the people working in your team directly um, who have different perspectives, who you learn from, those inspiring
Mm,
people that
mhm,
that you come across and you have a really interesting conversation with, in the tea room, and it's just, you think, wow, I never knew anything about that before. That never even crossed my
yes.
mind. So those really inspiring people who just bring warmth to the
Mm,
room and to the team. And I
mm,
don't mean that by those people who are out there, cracking the jokes necessarily, and bringing everyone together in that way. There's definitely those people, but also the quieter people who have these amazing insights that that just come from left field and just
Mm,
make your workday better. Sometimes they
mm,
contribute directly to your work, sometimes not. But I think
mm,
just being in that creative mood for me is really important. Um, and I think also uh, for me, my career is about trying to connect the dots. It's about looking at not just one sort of area or one project. It's looking at how individuals, families, communities are all connected and the
mm,
different parts of the lives they live. So I really love looking at, what's one person's experience, and getting a rich understanding
mm,
of that, but also what's the community's experience?
mm,
What does that look like in policy? So,
mm,
looking at all how everything is connected and getting perspective from that
mm.
is really interesting and really sort of drives me in my work. And also collaboration. I think it's sort of going back again to that sense of learning and being inspired by new people. So collaborating on new projects and finding people who are really interested in doing the things that you're doing,
Mhm.
um, and potentially doing them in a different way. I
Mm.
think that's something that will never stop being of interest to me.
Fantastic. So I'm hearing have build really good connections with the people around you. Like work offers us that opportunity. And in this day and age where we have so much mental health from isolation, work really does create an opportunity for people to socialize. So that puts a lot of responsibility on us as workplaces, right? To create those connections for people. So like you were saying before, your boss wanted you there to do your best work, not average work over a range of projects. I love that. Wish somebody had said that to me some time ago. But allowing that sense of connection and connectedness, which doesn't always need to be in the same room with the same people. I mean, we're getting better at being able to do that online as well. But there's also this incredible sense of going back to something that was fundamental to you as a younger person, which was I love people and I love to learn.
Mm.
I love people and I love to learn, and I want to see how people and learning function and join the dots for people. I know for me, I come back to this sense of I love people. I think people are amazing, and sometimes they just have a crappy understanding of how they turn up in the world.
Yeah.
And I want to help change that as well. That's really cool. So Ed, I want to say a big thank you for this. I think it's been incredibly insightful. We went to places I wasn't expecting today. So again, thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to share with us. Now, when we can make the massive divide between where we are, which is about 10 minutes down the road, and we meet each other in a cafe where hopefully I get to meet Lucas, what will I be ordering for you at the cafe? What?
Uh, I'm I'm a pretty cheap date, Joe. Just a cappuccino for me. Yeah,
Excellent.
no sugar, no special milk, no special order. Yeah, the the barista usually asks me, no sugar, no milk, no nothing. I think they get surprised that my order's so simple, but yeah,
Right.
easy to please.
Yeah, you are, because you're boy from the bush, which in this episode, for people who may not understand, means the outback. It means rural and regional Australia. So get your minds out of the gutters for the rest of you who weren't thinking that at all. So this has been the Entrepreneurial Clinician Podcast. We look forward to welcoming you to our next episode where we're going to delve deep into all things burnout, self-care, and what you can be doing to make your workplaces safer for your people. Until next time, go be your awesome self.